go live. That's how it works. Martin's usually our producer. He's the one who makes things go smooth. So I'm sorry, you got the JV team tonight.
Wait.
Welcome back, Mighty Vandals, to Tubs of the Club, your University of Idaho affiliate on the Big Sky Podcast Network. It's bye week, so things are going a little bit different here on Tubs as well. I'm your host, Brian Marceau. You'll notice Dallas is not here. You'll notice Martin's not here. You'll notice Trevin's not here. They're all taking the week off, but there are some Vandals who never sleep. And one of those is joining us today. By the way, Tubs of the Club brought to you by Snake River Stampede Canadian Whiskey. Viewers can see this. Listeners, you'll find out in a second. We've got a real special guest tonight, Greg Kimberling. He's here. Greg is one of the co-founders of the 1889 Collective, which that's the entity taking care of NIL stuff for University of Idaho student athletes. If that sounded vague, it's because we got a lot of questions. But first, Greg, glad to have you on, man. Just give yourself a second to introduce yourself to our listeners.
Thanks, Brian. I'm a longtime Moscow resident. I'm a third-generation Vandal. We have fourth generation already completed college. We've lived here my grandparents were married on campus in 1920. So we've been around a little while.
That is a while. It's not quite 1889, but that's a big deal. But Greg, really stoked to have you on for the bye week because honestly, we had a few people ask us prior to the bye week if we were going to get you guys on. You and I had talked in the summer about trying to make some, get on here to talk about the collective. Then I ruined everything by my daughter being born in May. So my bad, guys. But you're here.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Charlotte's been to 3 Vandal games too, man. So the indoctrination starts day one. So look, I have a questions for you about 1889 because look, the landscape of NIL, especially like at the Big Sky level, it's just all over the place because look, this is relative to college athletics. NIL is new. There isn't a standardized way it's done or it's incorporated. Some schools have had things up and running right away. Some schools were kind of pushing for NIL. I mean, schools themselves can't do the NIL. It's a private entity. But some schools, they really want that private entity to jump in. Some schools are on the cautious side because it's an evolving landscape, not a ton of regulations, lots of ways to, feel like you have some issues. You are part of navigating that unsteady ground. So just to start with, let's pretend a listener is like, hey, 1889 Collective NIL, I don't know what that means. Greg, tell us, what is the 1889 Collective?
So the name of our collective, 1889, references the first year the university started or was founded. And basically what we're doing is we're trying to, in a nutshell, raise money to assist in keeping athletes at the University of Idaho and coaches at the University of Idaho. And there are three of us, Bill Kearns and Dave Tester out of Boise, and myself out of Moscow. We have incorporated. We are a separate entity unto ourselves. We are not technically affiliated with the University of Idaho, but on the other side of it, our sole goal is to help the athletic department and student athletes reach their potential. And as we saw last year with football, we'd like to retain a few more of those players who went elsewhere. I think that's important for the success of our program. And you're right. You mentioned that it's a changing landscape. Every day is different. We're trying to be very careful about what we do and do it in a proper manner. I know there's a lot of rules out there that aren't being enforced right now, but we're not pretending that they're not being enforced. We're walking the fine line, and we're doing everything we can to help the student athletes of the university stay in Moscow.
So you brought up the collective was founded by you, Dave Tester, and Bill Kearns. Do you mind giving just a little background of like how you three went from there's no entity to the entity is founded by you three? How'd that go?
Well, that happened in a number of conversations over many months in many different settings. And Dave and Bill and I know of each other, and we've certainly been encouraged by a number of people to step up. Bill and Dave are in Boise, and they do a lot of the work down there. And I am probably more the administrative officer. I take care of contracts, the money in, the money out, the basic administrative functions of a corporation like we are.
So you brought up something I just hadn't heard about before, because just when I heard name, image, and likeness, I'd always understood that as related to the athletes, because just in a broad sense, it was court cases related to the name, image, and likeness of athletes that led us kind of to where we are today. Had you guys always thought of the idea of incorporating coaches in that too, or like how'd that happen?
So, Brian, really what we're focused in on student athletes. However, we are longtime supporters of the university. We know the value of having good coaches who are providing excellent products for our student athletes, and more importantly, rallying the alumni of the university. So have we dealt with anything regarding a coach? No. But if the door would open, whether it would be under this corporation or something else, we want to, again, do our part to help raise money to keep the really good people here in Moscow.
Okay. Okay, thank you. That makes sense. I just when you reference coaches, I just in my head I hadn't put it together, but you are a private entity, right? So that's part
Yeah.
of the good news about NIL being separately is it's separate. The bad news is it also means like individual people like yourselves are the ones who start this. So what are your hopes for, hey, let's say in the next year or so, and let's say the kind of goals you guys have together are actualized.
So
What does that look like?
so I can tell you that when we officially became a corporation in May, we sat down and our goal was in the next 6 months to put at least $100,000 in the bank. And I can tell you very comfortably that we're over that. And in addition to that, we have given out probably close to $50,000 in NIL contracts to students who are active here, who have been supported by businesses or other individuals who want to remind them they're important to us. So from our perspective, obviously we're not satisfied. We're just really getting started. But we made our $100,000 goal really pretty easily, and we've dispensed almost $50,000 in money already to students, in addition to the money we've raised.
Okay, so when you reference the goal of at least 100K, you made it, and you guys have dispensed around 50-ish K to student athletes.
Well, we've really raised 150, 50
okay.
of which has gone to student athletes.
Okay, raised over 150, 50 of which for sure is with athletes. When you talk about the raising of the funds, I don't know if this is intuitive to you because you're actually running it, but like to an outsider, like how does the collective itself actually function?
Well, part of the challenge that we have is everything's a moving target every day. So I can tell you the three of us have worked very hard to talk with businesses, corporations, individuals who either have a soft spot for the university or realize what we're doing here and the importance of it. And we're reaching out to them. And that's really been our initial success. Do we want to get more organized? Yes. Do we, we don't have an official website up yet. All these things take time, and it's really just the three of us doing all the work.
Okay, so it's you guys are the work is outreach to get the word out,
Sure,
to get people on board, and then individuals, like I said, individuals, corporations, entities donate. They donate money. And then when people donate, are they donating to the collective? Do they donate and they can like say, hey, can this be earmarked for basketball? Like, how does that work?
It's all up to the donor. So Brian, if you wanted to give money to an athlete on the tennis team, we would put it in. We'd talk to the tennis coach, and we develop a packet of information that the athlete and the university have in place, so we're compliant and we're protecting the university. Or you could call up and say, hey, I have $5,000 and I want to give it to the men's basketball program. I don't need it designated for an athlete. So what happens then is that we put that $5,000 in an account designated for men's basketball, and the men's basketball coach, we request his input as to what should be done with it, or should we just accumulate the money at this point. Same with football. We've got golf involved. We're women's basketball. We just got our first female athlete who was on a really nice NIL contract. And so we're expanding as fast as we can, but we're going to do it right. And the most important thing that we're telling people is we are not doing this to take money away from the U of I or Vandal Scholarship Fund or any special projects. If somebody, and I've had a number of people call me up and say, hey, can I just transfer my VSF money to the NIL? And our answer is no. We're not here to stop them from what they're doing. In fact, every one of us are Vandal boosters, and we're contributing, and nothing we're doing is diminishing that. We want to help enhance what we're doing by adding this possibility to the product that we're offering at the university.
Yeah, the goal isn't to, you don't view yourselves as competitors. This is supplement might be the wrong term, but it's an area the university is not allowed to touch. But it's
Correct.
a reality of college athletics today.
Correct. And by the way, I'm a member of the National Board of the Vandal Scholarship Fund. So I mean, we have skin in the game in all areas. The University Club, the Coaches Club, all those things, the three of us are involved in.
So you brought up there's not a website yet. Let's pretend for a second that my man Tom Kendall in the comment section, who has said that 1889 was a great year because it was, and who also says, awesome, thanks, Greg, Dave, and Bill. Let's pretend a guy like Tom Kendall is like, hey, 1889, love the work they're doing. I want to get involved, or with, as someone donating money, or like, someone says, hey, I really want to have some money that's earmarked for football. How does a person go about doing that?
So, Brian, you have our 3 email addresses.
Yep.
That's really the best way to reach out to us. Any one of us can help you out. I certainly am more than happy to step in and walk through the process with anybody and help them understand what we're doing and why we're doing it. And just like everything else, this is new. It's uncomfortable for certain people. We don't want that. We're just being very upfront. We're making changes as we understand them, and making sure that there's nothing we're doing that's detracting from the University of Idaho, because we're here to fully support them.
So you guys are working on getting that website, but I'll tell Tubbs listeners right now, if you guys get a hold of us on Twitter, that's at Tubbs the Club, or also if you email tubbstheclub@gmail.com. If you're trying to get a hold of either Greg, Dave, or Bill, let us know in the message. We'll forward it right away. Not a problem at all. Because let me just say, I do Tubbs the Club in my extra time as well. Working these side project might to me sounds like half demeaning, because this is like what you guys are doing is important work, but like these extra things that don't pay the bills, they fit in where they can. And sometimes things go fast and sometimes things don't. So any way we can support you guys, we want to make sure we do. Sam Dane in the comment section, very cool stuff. Thanks for making this new world of NIL a little more understandable. Sam Dane, a great vandal that I am aware of from my days hanging out with him at our fraternity house.
But you're young, Brian. You're really young.
I'm glad that someone is willing to say that. Increasingly, I notice people ask for my ID a little bit less. And there was a time in my life where I thought that'd be pretty cool. That was a while ago. So, Greg, before you head out, thank you for your time. Is there anything else that we're here, we're live. Is there anything else you'd like to say about what you guys are doing for listeners who are interested, who understand NIL exists and it matters, but for a lot of people, if you're not involved in the organization, it's new.
Brian, I think the most important thing I can say is that we're trying to do the right thing here, and we don't get to determine the cards that are played in college athletics, but we get to determine how we react to them at the University of Idaho. There are some phenomenal athletes that we have who are going to be our future leaders, and we want to do what we can to help give them the experience that they may get somewhere else, and stay in Moscow, because I'm a U of I grad, and it was one of the best things I ever did for myself, is going to the U of I and getting a great education. And we want to afford them the opportunity to do that in a very changing market. So what I would ask is, if there are people out there who can help contribute, they can tell us exactly where the money goes, or the program, or they can give us all the specifics in the world. These are all drawn up under contracts, and they're taken very seriously. And we want to expand what we're doing. We need to raise another $250,000 here soon in order to keep on top of this. So if anybody wants to visit with me or Bill or Dave, we're all ears, and we'd be more than happy to explain to you exactly what we're doing and how we're doing it.
Okay. Last question. I probably should have covered this before we went live. Do you mind if I throw your email up in a Chiron as the show continues on, just as a contact point in case people want to get a hold of you? Okay.
Absolutely.
That's something I'll just leave up for most of the show so that listeners can see that's another place to get a hold. Again, like we said, if you guys don't know how to get a hold of the 1889 Collective, message Tubbs. We know how to hit that forward button. Crewhead76 in the comments section, Greg, saying, thanks, Greg. Appreciate you guys. And are the contracts per year or one time? I'm assuming he means like the NIL contracts. Okay.
It's a 12-month. However, just so you know, if kids want to move on, then the contract is subject to a cancellation. So if Brian, you got a NIL offer in December and we had a contract with you and you left, we have the ability to stop the payout under certain conditions. So
okay, so it's pretty much tell me if this is like the idiot version of this for a second, Greg. So I'm just making up a number. Let's say someone has a $10,000 NIL deal. You could understand that's going to be paying $10,000 divided by 12, pay them 12 times. Which obviously a contract has responsibilities on both sides, which is to say if a student says, hey, like I'm transferring, you guys, it's not a big deal to say, well, hey, it was great working with you. But as of now, like a contract's over because you're not here.
So let me clarify that, Brian. If you gave $10,000 to an athlete and you told us to pay it to him now, we would do that. Okay. And so if he left early, he would still have the $10,000. We have a number of other people who want it split in 12 payments, and so we're going to do that. We're going to listen to the donor and what they want, and we're going to carve out a contract that fits that, not only taking into account the athlete involved, but whoever's giving the money. And of course, we're in touch with the coaches who are involved, because we want to make sure they understand what we're doing. We're not here to interfere with their program or their coaching or any of that, but they need to know the options that we have, and we want them to approve it. So,
okay, so in a lot of ways, the contracts you guys have some leeway to be flexible based off what donors are hoping and also what works for the athlete.
Well, we're going to follow the donor's wishes unless it conflicts with the athlete's situation.
Okay. And hey, we got another question, man. Crewhead76, is eligibility linked as far as academics?
Haven't ran into that at all. And almost every athlete that we've given a NIL contract to has got a 3.5 or a 4 and doing very well. But that's a question that I'm going to pursue. Again, remember the coaches are involved, and so if we ran into an athlete that maybe was flunking out of college, my guess is that we'd find that out.
Okay, so to answer his crewhead's question in a different way, it has been irrelevant so far because the NIL deals are all the people who are not remotely close to academics being an issue for eligibility.
Correct.
Okay. Correct. All right. Well, hey, Greg, thanks for coming on.
You bet.
Hey, listeners, not just live listeners, because people are going to listen to this on YouTube and on podcasts later on. Get a hold of Greg. His email is kimberling@moscow.com. I'll post that up here for viewers to see. That's Kimberling with ing at the end @moscow.com. But again, if you can't remember that, email Tubbs the Club. We'll hit that forward button.
Brian, thanks a lot, and go Vandals.
Go Vandals. All right, guys. Have a good night, Greg.
Thanks.
All right, guys. So what you're noticing that, by the way, I really appreciate Greg coming on. Patty Frick saying he'll be available in like 5 to 10 minutes. So in like 5 to 10 minutes, we're going to have someone else hopping in on here, which is great news. It'll give me time to type up that Chiron. So, hey, it's the bye week. Things are just a little bit different here. Before we transition to talking about football, I got to talk about something else close to my heart. Snake River Stampede Canadian whiskey. Look, you got two options. Either the entry-level Snake River Stampede, that's $25.95 at Idaho State liquor stores, or Snake River 1915 small batch, that's $38.95 at Idaho State liquor stores. Both options have double barrel finishes. Both options are 80% rye, 80% corn, 10% rye, 10% malted barley. Your Stampede is aged 4 years. Your 1915 is aged an additional 2 years, and Stampede's double barrel finishes ex-bourbon, ex-Oloroso sherry casks. Your 1915 is ex-bourbon, ex-Canadian rye whiskey casks. Either way, they're two of the best buys in Idaho State liquor stores. If you haven't bought one yet, I don't know what's wrong with you. Grab yourself a Snake River today. So, hey, checking in on the bye week. And look, in a lot of ways, this is finally a week, I think, for Vandals to relax a little bit. There's the obvious good news of Jack Lane kicked ass against Eastern Washington, and that lets you completely hit reset on what your understanding of Idaho offensively had been for those previous 8 games throughout this season. But the other reason that I don't mind having this week off is now that we finally have a minute to kind of, reflect, gather ourselves, compose ourselves, whatever you want to say, talking about Idaho football. This year's been a ride, and a ride that has been, every football season is obviously unique. It's obviously constructed in its own way. It has its own challenges, whatever. We all know that. This year itself has been kind of a different level of interesting to me for Idaho football, because this is, look, in year 3, heading into this, and hey, Crewhead 76 saying Vandals number 7 in playoff poll. I'm glad you brought that up. See, that's what I mean about relaxing, Crewhead. Idaho had a murderous early schedule, like you guys all know. 2 FBS games, 5 consecutive ranked FCS teams, and then Eastern, who, in spite of the record, Eastern Washington does not suck. That's quite a run of games before Idaho. Look, next week, Idaho's got top 5 Portland State. That's kind of the first easier Big Sky game the Vandals have had the entire season. The matchup is going to be favorable. We'll talk about that when we get there. But Portland State is sitting at 1 win. And Brad Smith in the comments section saying, can you explain the top 5 Portland State reference for a relative newcomer to the podcast? Brad, absolutely. Because, hey, it's bye week. Like, if we're going to cover other stuff, now's the week to do it. So this dates way, way back to that time in the 2020s. Most of us prefer to pretend did not exist. That's that COVID year. So, Brad, if you remember, Idaho played a spring COVID season. Portland State did not opt into that spring season. What Portland State did is they played a scrimmage against University of Montana. University of Montana did not opt into that spring season either. They played 2 scrimmages, one against Portland State and then one against, I think it was Central Washington. And after that, after the Montana-Portland State scrimmage, a friend of the show, a guy I really like to listen to, one of the most knowledgeable people covering Big Sky as a whole and covering both Montana schools, Colter Nuanez of Skyline Sports. And he has a 2-hour show each day for ESPN Missoula. So, okay, hey, absolutely love Colter. But the top 5 reference comes from after that Montana-Portland State game scrimmage back in 2021 or 2020. Colter referred to Portland State as the top 5 program in the Big Sky. This was after they lost like 7,000-3 in that scrimmage to Montana. He was trying to contextualize Montana being good by saying Portland State was a top 5 program. Now, that Brad is what happened. And since then, we just kind of rode with it. I have been sensitive to Portland State for years, being kind of rounded into like a preseason. They're always a team that a lot of outside of Big Sky media, outside of Tubbs the Club, Big Sky oriented media, always kind of has this view that, hey, they had this great recruiting class. They're, Portland State's could be a dark horse. Every single year, Portland State has a theoretically great recruiting class because they're in a city. And some of the people who they happen to recruit high school wise, they can more easily get to camps than like the guys University of Montana recruits, or a lot of guys in the state of Idaho. They don't have lots of camps they can necessarily go to where you get a star. Year after year, I would always hear about this great Portland State recruiting class that had to materialize. Full disclosure, Brad, never materialized because it's not going to materialize. And at that moment, that was kind of my peak. Come on, guys. Come on. Portland State, what are you talking about? They play in a high school stadium. They play they play in Hillsboro, not even in Portland, whatever. So the reference, Brad, was Coulter calling Portland State a top 5 program. And from then on, we have just said top 5 Portland State. That's it. So, Brad, there you go. That's the story of top 5 Portland State. Is it more dramatic than it needs to be? Yeah. Are we going to stop doing that? No, not a prayer. No, the Portland State is top 5 Portland State for as long as I'm part of this show. So shifting back to the bye week talk, Patty's going to be here soon. Then we can pick the Big Sky. Idaho, as Truehead brought up in some of the playoff previews, sits at number 7. So, Brad, you're welcome. Glad I could help out. If Idaho sits at number 7 right now, Idaho winning out means that's Idaho skipping the first round of the playoffs and hosting into the second round. Why do I care about that? If you're a newcomer, let me just pretend we have some more listeners, kind of like Brad, who, look, they know you want to make the playoffs. They know they want Idaho to make the playoffs, so that's more football. Why do we want to skip the first round of the playoffs? It's the week of Thanksgiving. Attendance is universally atrocious the first week of Thanksgiving because that's the number 2 travel weekend in the United States. Everyone has already made their travel plans. Students are gone. The city of Moscow is not actually that big a city. And as much as I love the city of Moscow, as much as I love people like Greg Kimberling, who just came on to talk about, what they're doing to support the school while at Moscow, the city of Moscow itself doesn't orient itself around athletics the way like the city of Missoula does. So why do we want to get out of the first round of the playoffs? Attendance is awful. We want Idaho to host on a weekend. We can get people there. And because so many people have to travel pretty far to get to Moscow in the first place, we want people from Boise, people from McCall to have time. Sam Dane in the comments section saying, I remember a Thanksgiving break game when I was an undergrad, called it the Bob Curtis Bowl. Had a great time. You know what, Sam? I was there for that game. About to throw Patty in this discussion because you and I are both there I was cracking a cheap bottle of wine. But that was the joke of that game, right? Is everyone's gone on Thanksgiving at that time. That was one of the rough FBS years that you're talking about. And look, the joke then was there's 4 people, but like, hey, we don't want a playoff game to be a joke. We want as many people as possible to be there. So that's why it's a big deal to skip in. And hey, Patty, glad to have you on. Thanks for jumping on short notice. The bye week, things are just a little bit odd. Yes, you still got that Eastern flag behind you. So Patty, to get you caught up to speed, we just, we had a listener, Brad, asking like, hey, what's this whole top 5 Portland State thing? So we went through that. I was talking the benefits of, hey, right now, like Vandal fans can absolutely relax heading into this final stretch because Idaho's been through the rough part of their schedule. Getting Jack Lane back is a huge deal. And honestly, Idaho controls its destiny. Win out, they're going to skip the first round and host. Lose, and you won't. But I guess I'm curious about your question. I know like we had you on to talk the Eastern perspective. I want you to pretend that flag behind you is a flag you would have flown your first 2 years in Moscow. What's your temperature on Idaho heading into this bye week?
Right. I think Idaho really got over a big hurdle those last 3 weeks, getting into the bye week they're dealing with a lot of injuries, but in terms of a lot of the like core of the team is healthy. They're good to go and they're looking good. There's obviously been some issues, but like they're starting to get healthy going into these last 4 or 5 weeks of the season, which is a massive, massive deal when you look at, the grand scheme of the playoffs. Those teams that get healthy towards the end of the year, maybe they drop a game or two that they shouldn't have earlier, so they have to go on the road. But I mean, Idaho's shown that they can win games on the road, and they have a chance to, obviously, if you're a Vandal fan, you're hoping that they're hosting a second and potentially quarterfinal round game. But even if they're on the road, this Vandal team all of a sudden they're a lot better team, I think, than I think what were they the number 7 seed in the FCS committee's top 10 today?
I'd have to see the reference point. I just pulled it out of Crewhead 76 in the comments section.
Okay, so I think it was the FCS committee, the official committee that selects the playoff teams and the seeds and stuff, placed Idaho at 7, despite being a 3-loss team. Obviously, one of those is Oregon, so who cares? But that's a big deal. I mean, being a top 8 seed with those 2 losses. And looking forward, Idaho should probably win out. They're going to have 1 or 2 kind of relatively challenging matchups, but they should win out, and they should be hitting the playoffs, probably a top 8 seed, hitting the ground running. And when you look at the scheme of the Big Sky right now, Montana State, Montana, and Davis all play each other in these final 3 weeks of the season. Let's say Montana State beats both of those teams and wins out. All of a sudden, another team in front of Idaho has an extra loss. And, Idaho has a chance to, if they take care of business and some things fall the way that maybe I am expecting them to, and they might, Idaho has an outside shot at a 4 or a 5 seed in the playoffs, which is a huge deal.
Yeah, so let me bring up what you referenced. And by the way, you were correct. The reference from Crewhead 76 was to the FCS playoff committee releasing in-season top 10 ranking for what we care about, getting that by. The ranking that matters is 8. 8 and better, you get to skip the first round. We'll worry about semifinals, all that kind of stuff later. Phase 1 is get out of that first round. The rankings are number 1, North Dakota State, number 2, Montana State, 3, South Dakota State, 4, South Dakota, 5, UC Davis, 6, Southeast Missouri, aka SEMO, 7, Idaho Vandals, 8, Mercer, and then just outside there's number 9, Incarnate Word, number 10, Montana. So I guess I want to talk about that from the Idaho perspective for 1 second. 2 things to me, Patty, that stand out. You're right. Idaho has 3 losses. I like that the committee acknowledged that Idaho playing tight against Oregon, very tight against number 5 Davis, and yeah, they got their ass kicked by Montana State. But having 2 tight losses to good teams, including an FBS loss, did not really penalize them. And I want to contrast that with Montana for a second, who has Montana has more wins than Idaho, but Montana has an objectively easier schedule. And the committee acknowledged that, putting Idaho at 7 over Montana. How do you feel about Idaho sitting at 7 in that ranking?
I think it's about right. When you look at the resume for Idaho, the ranked wins, your losses are, a quality loss in the eyes of the committee. Obviously, getting blown out by Montana State isn't ideal, but when you look at this, Idaho lost to 2 top 5 teams with their second and third string quarterbacks. They probably, their third string quarterback had a chance to go tie the game and force overtime against the number 5 team in the country right now. And with how injured Idaho has been, their resume, when you couple that with what they've gone through injury wise, it's a pretty dang good resume. You win out, Idaho would be 9-3 in the Big Sky, right? In conference play, it'd be 4 or 6-2, correct?
If Idaho were to win out,
yes,
yeah, because their two FCS losses are Montana State and Davis. Those are both conference games. If you win out otherwise, that's 6-2 in an 8-game season.
Right, and all of a sudden, hey, you're 9-3. And when you look at this, you look at the national landscape, look at some of the national schedules. Right now, the number 4 seed, South Dakota, they play North Dakota State in 2 weeks. You've got to think that's probably you got to think North Dakota State wins that game. Or yeah, North Dakota State will probably win that game. It'll be a big game, but hey, if they lose that game and it doesn't look very close, you got to think Idaho's probably inching up a little bit. We already talked about, hey, Davis plays Montana State in the next coming weeks. Some things have to go Idaho's way, but like if the chalk happens, Idaho all of a sudden is looking like they could potentially, sneak into that 4 or 5 seed. And I mean, getting a 4 or 5 seed with your starter out for 3/4 of the season that's pretty damn impressive.
Yeah, and something I just want to touch on too for Vandals here, because again, hey, as we've hit on 1,000 times, it's a bye week. Focus is just a little bit different. With that top 10 ranking, we also know narrowly, Vandals know the teams that they can be box score watching the next few weeks, as far as either helping or hurting Idaho's situation. One team to look at, and this is still local, Big Sky, UC Davis. They still have Montana State, and Sac State on the schedule. If UC Davis is for real and they win 2 out of 3 of those games, then hey, that's a real football team with 2 losses on the season. They're going to get a kick-ass seed. They deserve it. Well done. But Davis has to actually win those games out for it to matter. Outside of the Big Sky, Sam Herder has an article up about like 10 biggest games with playoff implications. Mercer is another team to pay attention to, just because if Idaho's 7, I would love the teams 8 through 10 to each pick up some losses to give Idaho a little bit more of that, my buzzword for the year, margin for error. So that means, hey, if you're wondering who to pay attention to, I'm saying we know Davis because we're going to do that for the Big Sky, but Southeast Missouri State, Mercer, Incarnate Word, and Montana. And hey, I know I just said that Davis has to play both Montana schools. Yeah, Montana has some actual games coming up too. They've got Davis and Montana State as well. So there are some teams both above and below Idaho who have some losses to accrue. Hot take, and I'm going to ask for your hot take on this, Patty. I think Vandal fans now need to aggressively be UC Davis fans, because if Davis picks up a good win and a couple losses, they suddenly become a bubble team as far as Idaho's ranking, like bubble around Idaho's ranking. If Davis mostly wins out, yeah, they stay above Idaho, but that will also shove some teams that could move up away from Idaho. So I guess that's my new hot take is, if you're a Vandal fan, you should be really a UC Davis fan. Just based off that top 10, what do you have any takeaways about what you think Vandal fans need to be rooting for?
All right, so there's a couple, like you referenced, there's a couple teams that you got to be paying attention to. Mercer, Southeast Missouri State. Another one to keep an eye on is Tarleton State. Tarleton State, they've all of a sudden find themselves in the front of the UAC, and they still have Central Arkansas on the schedule, who is number 11 in the stats poll right now. You got to think probably the winner of that game will be right around a 7 or an 8 seed in the playoffs. It just kind of depends on things work out. But I almost think, you want Davis to lose to Montana State probably. But if Davis drops a game to Montana, and then, Montana is probably going to lose to Montana State. If Montana State wins out and then Montana beats Davis wins out, I think that all of a sudden puts Idaho higher than Davis. Just depends on how things go. I think all 3 of those teams could potentially be like a 5, 6, 7 seed in the poll or something crazy. But the biggest thing is Idaho has to win out, right? I mean,
yeah,
if they don't win out, you're not a seed. You're probably a playoff team, but you're playing on Thanksgiving weekend, and you don't even know if you're going to be home on Thanksgiving weekend, which isn't ideal. But SEMO is another one to really keep an eye on, because they're right in front of Idaho in the poll right now, or in the top 10 right now. And SEMO, they have a relatively weak strength of schedule, but they aren't an invincible team, right? They're a good team, but they're not invincible. And so if they were to drop a game, Idaho would definitely move up to that 4, 5, 6 area of the bracket, which I think being a 4 or a 5 seed is very nice compared to a 6 through 8 seed, right?
Let me say it different then. So like maybe you've now sold me on this. What Vandal fans need to do, they need to be aggressively Montana State fans, and then just let Davis and Montana kind of beat the hell out of each other. Because one of those teams, if Montana State wins out, and hey, the Bobcats to me deserve to win the Big Sky. Like that's, right. I mean, obviously they have to actually win the games, but eye test, they look like the best Big Sky team. If Montana State beats both those teams, and that obviously means like, hey, Davis and Montana, one of them is going to pick up an extra loss. As long as Idaho wins out and other teams are going 500 to close things out, that's kind of Idaho's route to cruising up into that 4 to 5 range.
Right. I think if Davis drops 2 games moving towards the end of the season, and one of those is to Montana, I think Montana's loss to Weber will allow Idaho to stay in front of them, especially if Idaho wins out and beats Weber, which is a big deal because that puts you as the number 2 Big Sky team in the polls, right, or in the seeding, and a number 2 Big Sky team that's 9-3 is probably a 4 or a 5 seed. You got to see what South Dakota does. If South Dakota looks pretty dang good, I think the top 4, it's going to be hard to crack the top 4, but South Dakota has North Dakota State still on the schedule, like I said. And, South Dakota is no stranger to drop in a game that they shouldn't. I mean, Youngstown played them pretty tough a couple weeks ago. But, overall, I mean, it's just watch football, have fun, root for chaos, because usually that ends up working out pretty well when you're a good team.
Yeah, and hey, Crew 76 hit this. The composition of that top 10, or what I care more about is the top 8, is you got 3 Missouri Valley football teams. However, they make up 3 of the top 4 teams. Then you got 3 Big Sky teams at 2, 5, and 7 with a 4th at number 10. So I mean that is indicative of where the power in FCS football is. We got to pick the Big Sky, and before we do that, Patty, Hughes River Expedition, they've been Vandal owned and operated since 1976. They're ready to take you on the vacation of a lifetime. What do? Well, hey, enjoy multi-day trips down the Middle Fork of the Salmon, the main Salmon River of no return, and the Salmon River Canyons or the Subway. Check out special trips like the one to see the Perseid meteor shower. Camp on pristine bitches. Run amazing whitewater, hike scenic trails, spot wildlife, soak in beautiful natural hot springs, and fish some of the most remote stretches of river in the country. You just bring your clothes, let HRE handle the rest. So grab a paddle, catch dinner, and ride the bull all throughout the Gem State. Call them now at 406-540-4450 or check them out at hughesriver.com. Now, with all this said about playoff stuff, the playoff picture gets a little tighter as we hit those final 3 weeks of play. There aren't a ton of games that are really going to matter for playoff implications this week. But hey, to go through them, Patty, the first one, Martin does not have these in chronological order. I have no idea why, but whatever. I want to talk about what is obviously going to be your game of the week first, Patty. Top 5 Portland State at Sacramento State.
Yeah, it should be a fun football game to watch. There isn't much that matters in this game right now. I mean, Sac State's, they're not going to make the playoffs. They're 3-6 right now or something like that. Portland State has only won 1 football game this year. There's a chance that this is a really fun, like high-flying, explosive game. Sac State has played close games and, close, chaotic games all year with everyone, it feels like. And, it just kind of depends on if they're going to give it away or not. I think Sac State wins it, but I think they're just a more talented roster. But I think it's going to be a high-scoring game. I think it's going to be a lot of fun, like a fun game to watch if you just like watching football. If you care about the playoffs, no need to watch it.
Okay, so I'm glad you kind of course corrected at the end, because the only thing that I'm touchy about with talking about college football is the season moves so fast that every game does matter in one way or another. But you're right, for playoff implications, Sac State, Portland State does not have them. I'm going to go Sacramento State. Here's the issue. Portland State's one win came against the single team we knew they had a prayer of beating before they closed the year out at Northern Colorado. That's Idaho State. Why was Portland State able to narrowly handle Idaho State? Because ISU cannot stop the run whatsoever. So Dante Sacheret accounted for 6 touchdowns. Pretty good. That's pretty good. I just don't think that he's going to be able to do that at all against Sac State. And with one win, that's been PSU's only route to winning, is they have to have a huge, huge game on the ground, with Sacheret being able to also shred teams relative to what he can do through the air. Sacramento State is not going to be as susceptible to that as Idaho State. In spite of Idaho State handling Sacramento State last week, this is just a matchup that fit easily, to me, favors Sacramento State. As you referenced earlier, Sac State's lost a lot of close games. That's indicative of a team they're not a bad team. They've just had their own, like Weber State, they've had their own self-inflicted issues. Crewhead 76 says Nutsack number 8, pack 8. I'm going to assume that means Crewhead's picking Sac State as well, but that's Sac State for both of us. The next game that you care about the most, Northern Colorado travels to Northern California to take on the number 5 in playoff seedings UC Davis Aggies.
Yeah, this is the least interesting game of the week, in my opinion. Just generally, it's probably not going to be fun to watch. It's also not going to be close. UC Davis can win this by a lot. And the Davis doesn't have the letdown spot to, blame for any poor performances like we saw in Portland a couple weeks ago. But Davis is going to win this one by a lot.
How many touchdowns do you think Northern Colorado has scored in their 4 Big Sky games?
4 Big Sky games you said they've played?
Yeah.
Probably, I'd say 7 or 8.
How many field goals do you think Northern Colorado's converted in those 4 Big Sky games?
Is it 0 or 1?
I asked for a number.
I'll say 3.
So depending what Sam Dane in the comment section said, 6. Maybe he has stats up. Northern Colorado has 6 touchdowns and 1 field goal.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, in 4 games.
Close.
Yeah, you were pretty close. That was good. Which is to say, if you're going to beat a team like Davis, even if you get them on an off week, you have to score some points.
Yep.
That's the one thing there's a few things Northern Colorado does not do. But the one thing that the Bears really can't do right now is score. So, not worried about that letdown game against Northern Colorado. Obviously picking UC Davis to win this one. Another game, there's a little more intrigue here, Patty. Cal Poly hosts University of Montana in San Luis Obispo at Mustang Memorial Field. According to ESPN, tickets as low as $49. That's your most expensive game as of today, if you're going to attend. Okay, we talked about this a little bit on the power rankings, but pretend we didn't. There is some intrigue to me in this game. Why, Patty?
So Montana has not been able to stop virtually anyone this year defensively. The only teams that they have were, Morehead State. I think they're a Pioneer League school, and then Northern Colorado. So, they have not stopped anyone defensively. And Cal Poly, they're not, I wouldn't say they're a good offensive team, but they're a solid offensive team that can move the ball. And stylistically, I kind of like the matchup for Cal Poly. Montana wants to blitz you. They want to rush your passer. Well, it's tough to rush the passer when the ball is out in 2 seconds, like it typically is with Cal Poly. They, short pass game, maybe a run or two every once in a while. Pretty much everything teams have ran against Montana has worked if they don't know what's coming, which they shouldn't know what's coming against Cal Poly. I think Cal Poly is going to be able to move the ball a little bit. I think Montana will win it in the end of the day, but I think this one, it's weirdly intriguing just because I think neither defense is going to be able to stop anyone. I think the most advantageous thing defensively is I think Cal Poly might be able to stop Montana on the ground a little bit, which is gonna put pressure on their quarterbacks who they've been okay, but Ayat hasn't been amazing. And if this seems like a spot where they might play Ayat just because they shouldn't, but that's kind of what they've done this year. I almost see this being stylistically, I think it's actually a pretty good matchup for Cal Poly. I just think Montana's a lot better of a team, and I think they win kind of like an Idaho matchup, kind of like how that was with Cal Poly, a little bit high scoring, and Cal Poly ends up kind of pooping the bed away late in the game.
So I want to just hit some stats to help illustrate the point you made. Logan Fife has been pretty good in Big Sky play, but you referenced Kialili Ayat. You expect he'll play because it feels like, well, why would he play? Because I don't know. Montana does. Montana's a good program that does some weird things sometimes. Hey, what do you think Logan Fife's Big Sky Conference completion percentage is?
It's pretty high because he's played some bad defenses.
He has played some bad defenses, but hey, you play who you play.
Right. It's probably somewhere in the range of 75%, right around there.
69.5.
Okay. Yeah. I figured it'd be higher.
Small sample size theater here. What do you think Ayat's completion percentage is?
Oh, that's probably going to be, I'd say right around 50%.
57.
Right.
But you got the basic. Logan Fife has been good. You're right. Montana objectively has not played the top of the conference, and they got NAU when Ty Pennington was out, and NAU was completely lost offensively. But you're right. Logan Fife's been pretty good. 8 touchdowns, no picks, completing 70% of his passes. So why would he not play? I don't know, man. I'm picking Montana too, but I mostly agree with something Jason Mayer said in the comment section. Montana wins, but looks unimpressive. He picked 24-19. I think you need to throw in a couple extra touchdowns because neither of these teams is going to aggressively stop a team that can pass the ball. But I agree with that basic summation. I think Montana's not going to look – they're going to win, but I think there's going to be more drama than Grizz fans expect. Dane Moon, Cal Poly is better, progressively better later in the season, but I don't see them beating Montana whatsoever. I don't either, but I just think it could be tighter than you might guess. Next game – to me, the hardest one to pick of this week, Weber State and at NAU.
Yeah, this one's it's probably gonna be I don't know, it might be not as tight as the freaking Sac State Portland State game, but I think this one is probably the most competitive and the most interesting matchup when it comes to actual. There's a sliver of a playoff, what would the word be? Impact this game has. NAU, if they win out.
Yeah, if NAU wins out, they still need some help, but there is a reasonable case for NAU to be included in the playoffs if they win out.
Right, which it could happen, but it'd be tough for them to get in there, but whatever. I think NAU has something to play for here. And I don't think Weber does. I think at this point in the season, Weber is just kind of grasping for straws a little bit. They have thrown 4 games away this year. They should have won.
4 losses by a combined 10 points.
Which is crazy. I've been there as an Eastern fan. It sucks because you feel like you're right on the cusp, but the big plays never go your way, it feels like. And so also, stylistically, I think this is a pretty good matchup for NAU. I think, Weber's their weakness on the defensive side of the ball has been their linebackers. The weakness of NAU offensively has been their offensive line hasn't blocked to the second level very well. When you don't block bad linebackers, usually that means a running back makes the guy miss or the linebacker runs to the wrong hole and big runs happen. I would know that as an Eastern fan. So, I think NAU wins this one by 2 scores-ish.
Yeah, so I had questions in the comment section from Tom Kendall about Ty Pennington playing. Well, last week against Idaho State, Ty Pennington played, went 18-33 for 265 yards through the air, also rushed it 15 times for 88 yards. So, yeah, Pennington's playing. I am so back and forth on this because Weber is so they're 7 plays away from being understood as an Idaho level team right now. I mean, honestly, if had Weber held on to 3 out of 4 of those, they're probably that right around that Montana ranking right now, right? Of number 10 or 11. But the bounces have not gone their way, mostly because of Weber mistakes. Like fumbling 2 touchdowns away against Northern Colorado. No one made the Wildcats do that. This has seemed like it's just not Weber State's year. And the other part with Northern Arizona that I think makes them look worse than they are is the 2 games they played without Ty Pennington were most of Idaho and then all of Montana. Well, that's 2 top 10 playoff type of teams. So I'm not saying they win both those games with Ty Pennington because they probably don't. But the games, well, actually the Grizz game might be a toss-up because that was a pretty tight game. So I guess this is a long way of saying I'm going to go NAU. I don't feel great about it, but I also want those Weber State Wildcats as demoralized as possible before they actually head into Moscow to play Idaho in what's going to be the senior day for the Vandals in a couple weeks. So I'll go NAU. Last game, maybe Martin put this here hoping you would be on. Montana State at Eastern.
Yeah, I don't think it's a super interesting matchup. The matchup's just horrible. Montana State runs the ball better than just about and literally better than anyone in the country. And Eastern has really struggled to stop the run. They showed some flashes in the Idaho game of being able to contain runs on first down, but what Montana State does is they have explosive play, like explosive runs, explosive plays. Eastern's biggest weakness as a defense is they have just given up so many explosive plays on blitzes, and they're just not a very sound defense. And what do teams that run the ball really well do against unsound defenses is they run the ball all over those defenses. I think Montana State is going to rush for over 400 yards in this game, and it's going to come on like 4 plays. Like they're going to they might like not have crazy success in terms of just like chunking it down the field, but like they're going to have some explosive plays. They're going to win the game by a lot of points. I think it's the interesting part of this game is Eastern's offense going to be able to put up points? And I think a lot of that comes down to, is Kekoa Vesperis going to play? Kekoa left partway through the Idaho game with some sort of a small calf injury is what it sounds like. I have seen him padded up at practice, so I think he will play. I wasn't feeling too hot about that on Monday, but I did see him in pads throwing the ball. It's probably going to be a similar offensive style of attack for Eastern as the Idaho game. I'm sure Jared Taylor's going to get his run. I think if Eastern wants to have a prayer in this game, they're going to have to throw the ball a good percentage of the time, and they're going to have to hit some big plays. And to do that, they have to have Kekoa Vesperis in the game. And I don't think they're going to do that. I think they're going to roll with other guys for half the game as they have this year. And it's frustrating, but that's how they've done it at Eastern this year. I think Montana State wins it big. I think Eastern scores like 28 points. They make it look like it was competitive for a little bit, but it really wasn't.
Yeah, Montana State has the number 1 total offense in the nation, 512 yards per game. Funny thing, if you're an Eastern fan, Eastern's week 1 win came against the number 2 total offense in the nation, Monmouth. He's put up 504.9 yards per game. But to hit that rushing total, Eastern's acquitting themselves fine. They're number 16. I just bring this up because when you only pay attention to the Big Sky, it's easy to forget, like, hey, the tough Big Sky teams are like number they're top 20 on like all the stats that matter. So like, for Idaho last week, when I was talking about Idaho defensively not feeling quite as strong, well, Eastern's like the number 16 offense in the nation, and they've played some tough teams. They're good. That's what they do. Now you referenced, is Montana State the top rushing offense in the nation? Do you believe that is the case?
I bet they're behind Davidson.
Patty, you nailed it. Montana State number 2, 312.9 yards per game rushing. Davidson 25 yards ahead of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm filibustering because I'm picking Montana State. I think Montana State's a really good football team. I think number 2 in the nation is just about right for that ranking. And there's a lot of Montana State would have to play just an error-filled game while Eastern played flawless for this to be competitive. So, yeah, that's your Big Sky slate.
I think the only interesting thing about the Montana State game is like Eastern has played them very close at home historically. So like the last 2 matchups, Montana State won by 3. Eastern has won the rest of them on the red. That's the only interesting thing about this. And Eastern has yet to get like blown out on the red. Which
can I tell you something devastating though? From the Eastern end, when we recorded on Monday, ticket prices were projected at 55 per, down to 26.
Yeah, no, it's probably because there's a lot of Montana State fans buying tickets and a lot of Eastern fans selling their tickets.
Yep, I think that's the case. Yeah, Eagles I think they'll be dropping to 2-7 at the end of the week. But hey, that's the show. Support us at patreon.com/Tubs in the Club. Join the #OnlyTubs Discord. Best place to talk Big Sky, best place to talk Idaho sports on the internet. In particular, road games, man. It is wild how much comments we get, especially on road games. That's where Idaho will be in 2 weeks. I'll still be paying attention to the Big Sky slate, but I don't mind having this bye week. I got to say, Idaho has that big run of 3 games, which will be back next week. I mean, Patty and I'm producing in public here, Patty. We still have our weekend show to do, which we'll do either Sunday or Monday, but now we've got playoff stuff that we get to talk that I like. Sam Dane saying, wait, we aren't going to get a Mike Leach style analysis of the different mascots in the Big Sky. I'm sorry, Sam. That's just not the way we usually go here. There may have been a time, but that time is not today. We'll be back for the regular show, of course, next week to talk about Idaho and top 5 Portland State. There will be no post game for the bye week because it's the bye week, right? We all have to get healthy. That's why Patty and I are here and no one else is. So, hey, the email is on the screen as we sign off, Kimberling and Moscow.com to get a hold of that 1889 Collective. If you forget it, email Tubs the Club. We'll hit that forward button. Otherwise, guys, until Sunday or Monday, probably Monday, I'm going to say go Vandals. Patty.
Go Eagles.
Oh, my God. And, yeah, like Patty always says,
go Vandals. Go Vandals. Go Vandals. Go Vandals. Go Vandals. Go Vandals.